losing my head. I'm all out of touch. I'm feeling so dangerous. I can't get ahead, and I've had enough. I'm feeling so dangerous. I get this feeling when I'm running on it.
Oh,
Hello, is that Trenton?
it is.
Hello, my name's Tiana. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks.
I'm good. Surviving the week, okay?
Yeah, doing all right. Just getting through a bunch of stuff. Kind of did a calendar, looked at my calendar on Monday. I'm like, holy crap, I got a lot to do before the EP's out.
Yeah, I looked at the calendar. I'm like, it's actually not that far away now. Like, I feel like it's been obviously for probably a long time coming for you guys, but you blink and it's like going to be the end of October and only a couple of sleeps at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy to even think we were actually, it's a year ago now that we finished this and we finished recording it here and then had sent it off to the US to get mixed and set up. So
far out. Like, yeah, 2020.
Another age, another time, another.
Yeah, right. Another lifetime. And I mean, on that topic, it's some amazing news for 2020, which I think we all do desperately need. And it has been quite a journey to get to this point. How does it feel to finally be at this point at last for the release?
It's awesome. I think, when you have music, it kind of, you go through, I guess, a bit of a, you finish, as soon as you get those first mixes back, you get really pumped on it. And then you kind of wait for the next thing to come back and then the next thing. And then by the time you actually get everything back and ready to go, you kind of like, okay, it'll come out. It's kind of like you lose that initial buzz. And then you kind of get so complacent that by the time it actually comes out, it's actually, oh, crap, it's here.
Yeah, I forgot I made a thing.
The EP was intended to be like a collection of singles rather than necessarily being a body of work as you would an album. So we've been lucky that the way that we've been able to roll out each song one at a time and then kind of last two together has meant that we could kind of give each song its own moment and a bit of its own kind of attention and attitude. And I think that kind of, we started out that way initially, trying to make sure every song had a place and filled its own space when we were first writing it, and make sure that every song was distinct from another, so that we had, kind of all bases covered across 5 songs, and meant that we could do that kind of real sense of, I guess, individual campaigns as part of a bigger project, which has been really nice to have as a progressive release.
Yeah. And so was that always the plan? Did you always have that framework in place of 5 tracks and you wrote accordingly? Or were there any songs that didn't make the cut kind of this time around and you just whittled it down to what has ended up on the EP?
Yeah, we probably had about 20, 30 odd ideas. Certainly not fully formed. Well, I don't think we had any fully formed songs. Space is probably the closest thing that we had to a fully formed song when we went in the studio. But I think we really wanted to make sure that the ideas that we were tight for time because of some extra, like our studio time that we had set aside kind of got compressed by, we went from having 3 weeks to write, plan and record to 2 weeks to do everything. So it just meant that we had to really kind of throw ourselves at ideas, but we didn't have time to kind of waste going down a rabbit hole for a particular idea if it wasn't going to work. So I think we just made sure from the outset that every song had its own mood and tone and kind of aesthetic space that it fit in. And we've always been kind of a music first band, rarely tend to write vocals first. And I think that, the way the music comes together is often what kind of gives, I guess, breathes the first kind of seeds of a melody.
Yeah. And
then we kind of build off that. So it's all about just, making sure that there was a range of textures, I guess, from the outset.
And I know you touched on it kind of briefly there, but I've read stories that you guys were kind of all holed up in a house together for a really short space of time to kind of bring this and create this all together. Was that a positive environment for you guys? Like, do you work well in that kind of close quarters situation, or did it push you a little bit, whether it was creatively or other?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that, there's always, as pressure goes, there's always a happy medium. And that's especially true for us. I think when there's no pressure, I think we, like most musicians, just tend to, be happy and say, yeah, that's all right, I'll deal with that another day. It's, not so much laziness, just not being proactive as you could be. And I think that's sort of the challenge these days is like making sure that you are like keeping up with being proactive rather than reactive.
Mm.
But I think for us, it is that pressure that kind of has always brought out the best in us, just not when there's so much that it kind of causes us to fracture. And I think we were very carefully, very, very much balanced on that knife edge for a good part of this process. So, I mean, I think that tension came through in the lyrics, whether I wanted them to or not.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny looking at kind of the water versus dangerous, where dangerous was like I was trying not to let the tension kind of bleed into it, but that's kind of what gives that song its nervous energy. Whereas the water, it was kind of, I was trying to put the tension in, it kind of came out a lot more kind of reflective than it, so it's kind of interesting how that just kind of flipped itself. But it's been it was not ideal, but I feel like limitations and restrictions and challenges are what are probably the most helpful thing to creativity, because I think when everything's possible and you've got all the time in the world to figure it out, it's hard to actually commit to a decision. So a lot of the not just the the artistic process, but also the technical process of the way that we were recording things, because we weren't in a traditional studio environment. It meant that we had to get to a lot of sounds on the way in, so we were playing through guitar pedals rather than recording a clean DI, and then just in case we need to fix it later, it's like, full bore. We commit to this sound. If it sounds crazy cool, then it's going to be hard to replicate. So let's just get it right and go straight in. So
I like really that.
That full commitment to trying to get everything kind of committing up to a certain point, and then it was we could do all the creative stuff and the sound shaping and the textures on the fly, but then kind of polish it on the other end rather than having to recreate at a later date with different equipment and facility. So it's interesting. Like, it's not so much that it's out of your comfort zone, because it's not stuff that you can't achieve, but it's kind of like probably not the way you would have always planned to do it. So it is funny, like, how creativity can go hand in hand with getting out of your comfort zone and getting out of that complacency. So what a whirlwind, and what a great result. Sure. Well done. Yeah, it worked. I think we'll definitely make changes for next time. But I think we learned, as always, we've learned a lot from it, as you always do each time. And we'd learned a lot from it on, and then we tried to apply that this time, and then it came up with its own challenges. So I mean, there's always going to be that balance. But that's the only way you find that out, is by doing it.
Here. And I guess on the topic of and you mentioning how the lyrics kind of come a little bit later, I have read you previously chat about developing a bit of a separation of like personal narratives and exploring some perspectives and stories beyond your own. And I also read you talking about injecting some more fantasy elements alongside reality on the water and that kind of thing, which is obviously we've all had time to divulge and listen to and absorb. But was this continued exploration into like a bit of relatable ambiguity and vulnerability something you purposefully pursued lyrically on the EP?
That is a complex multi-part sentence.
I'm amazed I got through it.
Yeah, you do well.
Thank you.
I usually get lost about halfway through when I'm trying to give those fragmented sentences are definitely a thing. The paperclip Microsoft Word drove me nuts as a teenager. So, I like to think I've learned over time. But,
yes, we'll get there eventually.
That's my training for the wider world. It was something I tried to do because, the reality is when we were recording it on, literally because half the time in the studio I was actually on my honeymoon, and not that life is different now, but I think I'm in a much healthier, happier place than, for example, the first couple of albums. And so I think for me, happiness and my contentment is in reality rather than some hope for some particular outcome or path. You know what I mean? It's just, as you get older, I think you get a bit more grounded. And I think so that means that it's often harder to write from your own experience. You've got that weight of emotion, but you've also written about a lot of your own problems and your own challenges over time. So Anon was very much about, trying to lend my voice to other stories. And, I think in a lot of ways we could have told those stories a lot better to help people connect in a better way. I think the experiment there was to put it out at face value, still put all the emotional weight that I had behind it. But it was less about, I guess it was almost like the anti-medicine for ego,
Yes, I like that.
Especially at a time where we were figuring out where we sat in the world, and it was kind of, it was trying to be an antidote to ego.
Yeah.
And I think this time around, I don't think there was room for ego because I just was struggling so much with getting my head around the multiple ideas that were happening. And while it meant that I really literally wrote out of immediacy. That's all I had. And the environment, you know, the environment was amazing, but also I guess the mental environment was the opposite of the physical environment for me.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, you know, trying to give myself that room on a daily basis to go through that ebb and flow of feeling confident and then trying something and if it's not working and then feeling like a nervous wreck and then trying to communicate ideas to people and, you know, trying to get reference points of where I'm starting from because it's always starting that's the hardest. You know, it takes sometimes it takes 10 minutes to write a song and other times that creating that 10 minutes takes years.
Yeah.
And it's a quote I heard somewhere once and it's always resonated true for me. So I think this EP was just about it was about immediacy. Like that was the driving force behind the whole thing was just what was in front of me. It was for the water. It was watching people go out into the ocean and you know, remembering a story of a friend who just swam out to the horizon because he'd just given up and just you know he couldn't just like I don't know he was the sort of guy that I don't know he basically just went and swam out to the horizon and as far as he could and didn't really plan on coming back. And something just seeing about people going out into the water such a long way from where we could see up on the balcony, like on the top of the hill, just seeing how far out people actually would swim and then come back in. And I just thought it kind of, I don't know, kind of just, got into that idea of watching something that grew up in the ocean or like only ever knew the ocean kind of coming back the other way. And, you know, if you spend long enough out there, what would the world look different when you came back? And that was the thought process that came up there. So, you know, there was a sense of both externalization and internalization.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, that wasn't really intentional. I think it was just literally what was in front of me, both, you know, physically and mentally, that informed everything.
And interesting again, like being in that slightly different, you know, process environment, I guess it's kind of fascinating whether or not you would have done it differently if you're in a different, you know, had more time and had that space to overthink or to think more about it. Like it's fascinating. And it does have such a resonating sound to it, even though it is like seemingly has this really almost upbeat, uplifting kind of feel to it. There's a lot more going on under there. So that's a really amazing story. Got me good. Yeah. And I know like you guys as well, there is another bit of awesome news, like beyond obviously just the EP release. You guys actually have just announced too, you've done some promo shenanigans for the NRL and the AFL. Like you are literally being overachievers this year. How did all of this sporting shenanigans come about?
Honestly, I think it was just the right people with the right music on the right desk at the right time.
Nice.
You know, we have an amazing team behind us, you know, through our label, through our manager, through a few personal connections that, you know, didn't actually change the outcome. But once we actually got to this, I'll come back to that. But but it just, you know, we had our team kind of just working on different places where there were opportunities for the songs to grow, to reach audiences, to, you know, solidify what we've been doing. Because, I mean, we've, you know, been building up for a long time, and especially here in Australia, like over the last few years, really kind of putting in the hard yards to make sure that, you know, home is where we belong, I think. So, you know, wanted to make sure that we had every opportunity here. But, just the team kind of reaching out to people. You know, I know that the Fox team have been pushing hard to better integrate Australian music and I think more contemporary music rather than getting stuck in the, you know, the predictable, obvious choices of, you know, the golden era of rugby league in the early 90s, for example. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, we never outgrew it.
There's so many cliches that they've never quite gotten past. And if they have tried to move past it, they've shot so far past it to pop music, trying to appeal to this family audience that, you know what I mean? It's never quite felt like an authentic progression of what the sport is and what it represents. And I mean, the same goes for the AFL. Like AFL's, I think, been a bit more progressive in some of the artists that they've featured over the years, which has been really cool. But just, I mean, I'm saying this as someone that grew up on league. You know, we have other guys in the band whose families have kind of deep roots in AFL and Victoria. So I'm obviously speaking more so from my perspective. But just having it come out in that context has been amazing. Being able to do both codes at the same time in what, you know, for better or for worse, it's one of the most memorable seasons in history.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's one that I think people will definitely remember back to for a long time. So I think being a part of that conversation is quite cool because, I mean, sport is part of the social fabric of Australian life. And, you know, that for us is like a massive achievement.
Yeah, it's so exciting and like, yeah, representing some incredible Australian music. So I was so stoked to hear about that. So massive well done as well. You're
Yeah.
just kicking goals and I just made an accidental pun. So let's move on. Um, so going a little bit
Yeah.
broader here for a moment, and not to make it about myself, but one of my absolute favorite things in the world is when a band kind of defies labels and genres without kind of actively seeking to subvert those, things that are flung at them. And I feel like Hands Like Houses are one of those deliciously ambiguous bands who can kind of traipse around the rock realms however you please. And going back to the really early days for the band, I mean, this was like what MySpace and flip phone era when you guys first started. Did you always have
Yeah.
this idea of like the kind of band Hands Like Houses wanted to become? Like, did you have this really clear idea and you just wanted to make the music that you liked?
I think that's difficult. I think we're a band that's we've always been a band about balance, for better for worse. And I think that, we've always drawn from our influences. And that I guess the constant for our whole career has always been that we've drawn on what we're influenced by. And what we're influenced by when we were touring really heavy in the early days and we were getting stuck on tours with stupidly heavy bands, like when what we were writing didn't fit that at all. But that kind of just being surrounded by it meant that it bled into our songwriting. And then kind of as we started, I guess developing our own audience, and especially here in Australia, like kind of building up over here, we felt more and more like, I think there was a period there where we felt like we weren't able to really reflect what we enjoy listening to. It was just kind of what was expected of us. And I think that, we certainly made the most of it. I'm still really proud of the music we made in that context. And I mean, for me, like I'm probably the most into, heavier music. I've put it in inverted commas, like I'm the most inclined towards heavy music of the band. But I think it's just about, embracing our influences, embracing what each of us brings to the table. And there's always been a sense of a phantom center for us, that's not really specific to any one of us, any particular idea. And it's funny because, you get these narratives of like, the labels changed them, or, they've sold out for this X, Y, and Z. It's just like, no, it's just doing something that we enjoy that you don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're welcome for that. And it's not taking that away from anyone. But I think it's just that, that's the reason we have shifted each time, is because what we listen to shifts each time. What role each of us has on the songwriting process. Different members have had different priorities outside the band, or you know what I mean? Like the band's been I guess a higher priority for certain people than others at different times. And so that affects the ebb and flow of our songwriting process. And so that's obviously, that means that phantom center moves around as each of us moves in our different directions. So I think that's what makes it hard for us to lock down what Hands Like Houses is. And that's something we're trying to grapple with. And I think that where we are at the moment probably feels the most comfortable. I look forward to kind of exploring a bit more depth into kind of what is next.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll feel like as big a step as, I guess, some of our previous steps have been between albums. And that's the good thing about doing an EP or a handful of singles rather than like a full album release, because an album is such a commitment to a moment in time. That it makes, things that feel completely organic for us. You take a photograph of someone every day for a year and you understand the journey. But if you take or like every day for 10 years, you'll see how they get from A to B. But if you take a photo on day one and then year 10, you know what I mean? Like they're an entirely different. I feel like that's where albums kind of do fall short of communicating a band's journey, is because that they are snapshots in time without necessarily showing a full insight into the journey and the factors that make it up. So,
No, that's absolutely perfectly put. And yeah, such a great way to continue this amazing journey and see this evolution. And so many of us are so glad like you guys have just continued this journey. And especially when you gift us along the way with Fuel covers for Like a Version, which I unapologetically sing that song far too frequently to the delight and dismay of many people. So
it was a great song to start with. So it was a great song to work on.
Oh, it's fantastic. And I mean, there's so much more ahead for you guys. And this is even though, as we say, like it is slightly different snapshot than an album would be for you guys, it is such a momentous time for Hands Like Houses. I feel there is so much going on in your world and it is such a beautiful release. And all I can say is congratulations and enjoy the next couple of months, because I feel like it's just going to get busier and busier for you guys by the sound of it.
Look, I would love to have a breather. There's been a lot of work going into it, so I'm looking forward to when it's out. I can kind of take, a couple of breaths before, working on the next thing, whatever that is. But we've got a few ideas for what's ahead, and kind of focusing on our own communities, our little kind of supporter community. There's a few projects in mind for that, and I think back into writing and working on a few little ideas. So nothing ever really stopped.
No, and hopefully it's not too long before we can cop this EP in a live setting as well. That will be hopefully something we can all have to look forward to, if not too far away.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's why you got to make the most of what's in front of us in the meantime, because it could be a couple of months, could be a couple of years still,
100%.
which is scary to think about. But that's why for us it's worth putting the hard yards now to kind of put ourselves in a position that when it does come around, we're still haven't really lost momentum. I think a lot of bands are sitting and waiting it out, and that could have easily been us. But I think we made the call early on to let's just see what we can make out of it.
Yeah.
And it's all kind of lined up. We didn't really change plans because we couldn't tour something.
Yeah. Well, it's it's going to be an incredible time. Yes, it's going to be lots of fun, and I can't wait to see what happens next. But congrats on such a beautiful release, and thank you so much for taking the time to let me chat your ear off today.
No problem at all.
Hey, enjoy
I thought I did the chatting. We're good.
yeah, good. I feel better. You have a lovely night, and thank you again. And I can't wait to give this another listen. I've got a little cheeky copy here, so I'm going to go do a little sneaky listen right now in celebration.
Well, enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Have a cheeky enjoy.
I will. Have a great night.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
This feeling when I'm so close to breaking.